British Columbia. How are you doing? Trust me, this is a lot less intimidating than a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds that were here this morning. So much so that I'm not wearing my signature heels. I'm sticking with the Nikes. So for those of you who know me, you've probably never seen me wear jeans in your life. But I was trying to be a lot cooler than I actually am, as my daughter would say, for this morning. She's actually 14. And so I probably should have checked some of my slides through her for this morning's, but she's not here. So I think I'm ready to show some slides, and we're here. Awesome. Tech is such a great thing when it works, isn't it? Okay, that was kind of a joke. So great. This is a lot less intimidating than this morning. We had a great time this morning, by the way. We've had a lot of great things come out of it already. I heard a lot of really great stories about kids coming into the industry, and even parents that came today. Some of them approach us and want to change their careers. A mom who worked in a school came up to me afterwards and said, I think I'm in the wrong career. And I was like, well, here you go. You know, what a great time to bring your kid to this event today. So, and I really want to thank Pitt Meadows, because honestly, if Sarah Searle hadn't called me and just really asked in the nicest way for me to come, and you can't say no to her. She's just so lovely that she said, can you come for these kids? And I was like, well, of course I can. Like I just came back from Japan like 3 days ago. I was in New Zealand 3 weeks ago. I'm off to Barcelona. So I'm all over the world seeing cool factories everywhere. And I have to say, I'm in like my happy place when I see prefabrication that looks like artwork and is actually made in an unbelievable way. So it's been just a pleasure today to see such great work and such technology. And that I truly, truly mean. I mean, I've seen I've been around. This is not my first time at the rodeo, as we say. So, well, great. So let's see if we can get some excitement today and learn some things, and maybe we can interact a little bit as well. But I want to talk a little bit about expected experience today. And we talked a little bit about that with the 16 and 17-year-olds up to like 20-somethings that we saw today. And I'll tell you, I have to put this up actually because I work for Autodesk. For those of you who don't know me, though, I come from industry. So, and don't let that HBS thing fool you. I was older and I was pregnant when I went back, and I paid for it myself. So when I talked to the kids today, I was like, you should listen to me, because I didn't have the money back then until I got into this space to be able to go back and go to HBS later in life while I was a real pregnant at the time. So that's just a note. I do work for a lot of different types of groups and organizations. For those of you who haven't come to the Advancing Prefabrication show, I know Pitt Meadows has been there. There's some phenomenal opportunity there for those of you who are interested in this, as well as in Autodesk University, where I also speak. But just a little bit about what's going on the planet these days, for those of you who don't know. Our population, look, there's some seats down here, maybe not enough for this population, but our population on this earth is expected to hit 10 billion by 2050. 10 billion people. And the built environment, we need to catch up fast. That means more hospitals, more data centers, more manufacturing facilities, more of everything, basically, right? And I know you guys are real busy down here, or up here, I should say now. But to accommodate that, if you really think about it, that's like building in New York City every month for the next 40 years, just to catch up with that, where we're going today. I mean, many of you have been to New York City, I'm sure. That's no small feat. And there's other things happening besides the need that we need to really recognize, and that's something called convergence. So my new title is actually the Vice President of Enterprise Transformation Practice, mostly because convergence is happening, so we need to talk more about the outcomes of industrialized construction solutions and sustainability solutions and platform solutions. All these things are sort of melding in together, and as I would always talk about industrialized construction, it was never a talk without either of those two things. And so this is why it's so important that you all came here today as really a community together. Convergence is really blending the way that we do our businesses, right? So it's like the way separate technologies used to exist, or products or services. I always like to say, like, listen, this is no longer just my phone. It could be your babysitter, it could be your map, it could be your dating app. It's a lot of different things, but it is no longer, I would never say, just my phone. And if you ever lose yours for 5 minutes, you will realize it is not just your phone, because technology is converging. Processes are converging. Look, you're looking at cobots back there with Miller. We're looking at humans and robots acting together to get things done. I mean, you've got T-Stop here. You've got all kinds of manufacturing, converging with our construction process and design process here with, GT Stratus. Everyone that's out around this, everywhere around this booth. If you didn't make the sign at Viega, if you don't know that technology is integrating with fabrication, you should probably try that out. It's pretty cool. Take one home. And industries are converging. Most of my companies don't even know what to call themselves anymore. Are they contractors? What are they? Like, are they designers? Are they design builders? Are they technology companies? They just don't really fall into that one silo anymore. And that just means because business models are changing. How many of you would say your business model is different than 5 years ago? This is the interactive part. Raise your hand. Okay. Let me give you some stats. At the Advancing Prefab show, we just did some research, and it said something like, I think it was in the 60% number, that in the next 5 years, most people, and it's just like an audience of today, it was like almost identical to you, said that they would become more important in the design build process, in the front of the process, over 60%. Get ready for this part. 34% of the audience said that in the next 5 years, their business model would transform into something unrecognizable today, and they're already on that path to get it started. How many of you think you're on the path already for that new business model for the next 5 years? A couple people, not as many people just raise their hand. When I ask a real serious question, by the way, 34%, and I think 1/4 of the room were C staff and like owners and VP level and above. So these people actually know that their businesses are going to be different because they're writing the strategy for how that's going to work. Let that sink in. What are you going to do if 1/3 of this room completely changes their business model? I know some of you are competitors and supply chain partners and all that kind of stuff. Just think about that. Because why is it changing? We need to think about how humans are interacting with machines, and you can do it right over there, as I mentioned. But we need more sustainable outcomes. Owners are requiring more sustainable outcomes. Everyone out there is thinking about how they can participate in sustainability for their kids, for this industry. We need industry sustainability. Listen, we had a 16-year-old boy ask one of the women who's like one of the most certified welders here, "Are you worried about a robot taking your job?" And they were like, "We could have you and your entire high school show up today and say they want to weld, and we still need more people to operate these robots for all the amount of work we need," right? Like, those days are over. When I was younger, and I'm 51 now, I tell everybody my age just so you can see that it's not my first day on the job, but like, listen, people used to say that to me all the time, and I'd be like, I don't see these people lining up for you 10 years ago even, and now we are in an emergency state. We did not recognize what was coming over the next job. And now, how many of you need labor? Yeah, that was like a rhetorical question, that one. You got to do more with less, right? So architecture, engineering, and is about $14 trillion ecosystem right now. $14 trillion on this planet. And yeah, remote work, well, I know your Canadian government decided they were not going to come back. Is that what happened, I think, right? Recently? But that did revolutionize some of the ways we work for flexible time. Nobody laughed at the Canadian government joke. This is like a tough audience today. I thought the 16-year-olds were tough. I didn't say that to them. I didn't think they'd know. But a lot of our thanks. She's changing her business model, by the way. Like, a lot of our businesses didn't catch up to what's different, right? But by 2030, there's going to be up to 200 million construction jobs. And by 2031, scary enough, 41% of our construction industry's workforce is going to retire. Not me, unfortunately. But yeah, how many of you are going to retire after 2031? Like a bunch of you. All right. So here we go. We got to figure out how to do more with less. So what do we say to those kids this morning? We were like, we don't want you. We actually need you to come and want to be in our space. If you don't think that you need young people, or by the way, only 10.9% of the U.S. construction workforce is actually women. We are 51% of the population, people. If you want to grow your population of people that come to work for you. I don't want to tell you what to do, but like you're missing a whole half of the population that can come and work for you. And now, again, this happens to be my issue. Like we changed all the names of all of our sports teams in the United States to be some other name that wasn't offensive. I don't personally, it didn't bother me either way, but I will say from a marketing perspective, because I'm not political and I'm not a feminist. I'm a capitalist, 100%, for those of you who don't know me. If you want women to come into the trades and the unions, like I'm just saying you might not want to call it the brotherhood of something. Like you go to their, high schools and these little girls have no idea they can even go in the room. Like they don't think that meeting is for them. In New Zealand, they call it the fellowship. Like there's all kinds of names. But like, again, we changed a lot of names for things that made people uncomfortable, but no one seems to say, by the way, it's the biggest laugh I've ever had at the Brotherhood thank you. But we don't even want to, like, no one even wants to whisper that these are all called the Brotherhood. And then a bunch of guys get in a room and they're like, how do we get more people and more women into the trades? And I'm thinking, maybe you should ask one. Like, you should probably get somebody in the room that is a woman and ask them what would make them want to come work here. Like, I'm just saying. Again, I'm not a feminist. I'm a capitalist. It's for the return on investment. That's the truth. So, okay, let's talk about pizza. It's so much better than the gender stuff, right? Like, everybody loves pizza. It's not like a gender thing. How many of you like pizza? Raise your hand. I like pizza. So when I'm from Jersey, so we don't think Domino's is like real pizza, but I'm just saying. But if I did order pizza from Domino's, I could use my Apple Watch. I could make sure I could customize my pizza from my watch. I would know, I could pay for it with my Cash App. I would know when it went in the oven, when it was coming out, when the driver was coming. I would be able to see, if I wanted to, on my Ring doorbell on my watch, when he was coming up, and I could say like, hey, my dog, I don't want my dog to bark. Let me put him away, and I need contactless delivery, don't ring my doorbell to the driver and communicate with them, and they would say no problem, and then I would big ding, and I would know that my pizza is there, right? That's common. How many of you have ordered pizza like that? Although you need a Canadian credit card, I will tell you in Canada to do that. I know that. Saying for a friend, that's what happened. But do you all know that you can order pizza like that? If you don't, raise your hand. If you do not know, be honest that you can order pizza here. Okay, good. Honest people. Most of you, honest people. So that is true. That technology exists. And by the way, when I said that to the young people, every young person raised their hand that that's how they order pizza in the room. This is what we do. Like when we need to order a $400,000 generator, we actually fill out a bunch of paperwork. We go through, we figure out all this stuff. But then when we get to the day that we need the generator, we just pick up this thing called our phone and we call somebody. And they have to call somebody else, who then calls somebody else, gets a voicemail. Maybe they call back. They call somebody else. We've got people standing around, and it costs us a lot of money when they do. And that's how we figure out if a $400,000 piece of critical equipment is showing up on our job site that day. Our expected experience is exactly that. And I see people in the back laughing because we're like, yep, I see you. They're like, yeah, he's like, I just did that yesterday. My generator didn't show up. Like, yeah, we know that's what happens. That's our own. Why is that our expected experience? I wish many of you had come with the young people here today because you would learn what their expected experience is, and you should hire a lot of them if they'll come and work for you, because how many of you mentor somebody these days? I don't do that anymore unless I tell them we split half and half. You have to reverse mentor me on a topic of my choice that I think you know about. Like, I just learned about text data analysis from this 23-year-old at our company because he wanted me to mentor him. And I'm like, I need to know about research from text data analysis. And he was like, okay. So like we did half hour. And he taught me all about how to do text data analysis because that's something I'm interested in. So I would tell you, don't mentor anybody anymore. Split time with them and learn something that only they know in their expected experience. Because I was sitting up on a stage at Advancing Prefab the other day, and a guy said, and now that we're all adults, I can say the actual word. He said, we just can't get welders here because welding is not sexy. And I was like, obviously you never saw Flashdance, but I was like, let me take my phone out for you and tell you that on TikTok right now, I looked these up last night. It's been higher since a few weeks ago even. There's 11.6 views of welding on TikTok right now. You can see in those pictures, they're women. right? In those pictures, a lot of them, they look like normal workers, right? And plumbing, 6 billion, electrical, 3.1 billion, HVAC, 2.5, robotics, 2.5 billion, Miller, back there, 2.2 billion, right, back there. So we're just looking in the wrong place. Why? Because a guy who's like 67 years old has no idea what TikTok even is. So he's like, I can't get people to be interested in welding. I was like, my daughter's 14 and a half. She plays rugby. I was a rugby player for 15 years, for those rugby players out there. And Canada has rugby. And by the way, we did a thing with the U.S. Women's Rugby Foundation to put teams, rugby teams, women's and girls rugby teams with contractors to hopefully get them to sponsor each other. Because in my little daughter's team, they have 20-something girls, and 4 of them weld. One is welding stainless steel in the U.S. stainless steel, like welding Olympics, some championship thing. Like literally 4 girls out of 20-something all weld. I think you're just maybe looking in the uncool places where these kids aren't at. How many of you have TikTok accounts? How many of you have social media accounts for your organizations right now? Keep your hand up. Put your hand down if you make them go through a million hoops to post something up through your marketing departments. Yeah, okay, good on you. Because one person almost kept their hand up. Why? Because every kid these days wants to be a social media star, an influencer, and they don't, even if they don't, they just want to document their life for their friends of what they're doing. And also it'll attract more of their friends to see that you're good. She's like, yes, it does. She's like, don't tell anybody that, please. You got to go where these kids are, where these diverse populations are. And some people are still like, I don't know what TikTok is in this room, right? A couple blank stares still. That's okay. You will learn. Go in your reverse mentoring, ask somebody what TikTok is. And then I always ask in any language, and this resonates, it doesn't matter what country you're in, what does your business want to be when it grows up? You better ask that question to your C-level people, because here's how things change in life. This is a formula, I live by it. I actually love it very much. It's called Dan Miller's Formula for Change. All change starts with dissatisfaction on the way things are today. That doesn't mean you have to be angry or unhappy about it. It could be that you're aspirational and you just can't get there, so it makes you a little bit happy. You see something you want to be, but you have to multiply that by a vision of what's possible. Pitt Meadows Plumbing, if give you anything today, at least they're giving you a vision of what's possible with all these great companies that are here and the artwork in the other room. And after that, this is the part where most people fall down. They need 2 first concrete steps of action on what to do first. Very small concrete steps of action, measurable, that you can do. And all of that has to be greater than overcoming resistance. The resistance word is important because it's mostly internal resistance from your own companies, like 90%. Let me say that again. It's not like, well, the owner, or if that architect would only, no, it's your company. Your company is not changing. You are in control of your own destiny. It is mostly internal resistance. And that all has to be, greater than resistance. A friend that we met at Advancing Prefab this year said, president, in every one of his office whiteboards, he has in the corner written, you will never get anyone to understand a new concept, that their salary depends on them not understanding. Let me say it again. You will never get someone to understand a new concept that their salary depends on them not understanding. I don't want a world that estimating exists anymore on this planet one day. I believe certainty is better than, estimates and savings and VE and all that stuff. So if you're an estimator in this room, you should be shifting a little uncomfortably in your chair. I actually believe it's my job to make you all feel uncomfortable today, so I'm an equal opportunity offender, right? So I will say everyone should feel a little uncomfortable, because here's what's happening around the world. Owners are not owners anymore. They're serial owners. They own 10 hospitals or 20 data centers or 50 apartment, high rises. Whatever your $7 you can save them on tile is far worth nothing compared to putting more cars, more packages, more people being healed, more rent into those places, and we're just not articulating what we can do for them in order to do that. Instead, you just keep sending them, this tile is more expensive than that tile. How many people in here are estimators? Raise your hand. Pre-construction estimator. Your job sucks. Sorry. Why does it suck? Not because you suck. You're awesome. They just ask you the wrong questions all day long. It's like, is that cheaper than this? Is this cheaper than that? It's like, that's not the answer. Or what's the time of that versus that? Or who, that. At the end of the day, we're not measuring these things right, and I can explain that to you after this if you want. I always say you should ask your estimator one question and one question only first. Is this easier than what I'm doing today on site? Is what you just proposed, is it going to take two guys 15 minutes to do, or is it going to take the same, like compared to what we do today, right? Is it easier to install? Is it easier to get rid of the trash? Is it easier to understand what's there? Is it easier for us to have certainty around the cost? Just easier is the question. After that, if you say yes, the next thing you should be thinking is, how many people did I remove off that job site so that I don't have to manage things that are going on anymore in a job site where I can't see them, and get them into a safer environment like the fab shops that you have. So I always say easier leads to better and faster, and then ultimately adds more value. By the way, a lot of customers, cheaper is not better. Let me say that again in case you didn't hear that. I meet with all the big owners around the world. Cheaper isn't better to them. More certainty is always better than savings for them. Earlier isn't even better for them. They might have reasons that you can't be earlier. They might want to wait for the newest technology for their hospital or their semiconductor chip factory. They just want certainty on the durations, certainty on the cost. I can tell you don't believe me. Or you're just so beat down, you're like, it doesn't matter what you say, they're just going to ask me if it's cheaper. Which one? Yeah, he's like, they're not going to change, Amy. They keep asking me if it's cheaper. Stop at, who's your boss? Is he here? Oh, are you the boss? You own the company? Well, stop asking the guys that work for you if it's cheaper. How's that? Okay, so that's building product manufacturers. Look, if you're Victaulic, you were talking about stuff 5-10 years ago that was just about your product, and now you're talking, you want to be a solution aggregator. You want to talk more about prefab. We talked about that at your booth. I've always been a fan of Victaulic from day one. They are evolving. If you're Hilti or Victaulic or any of these guys, they want larger and larger assemblies. Who are your distribution companies out here and your building product manufacturers? Look out, because if they're manufacturing all the hard stuff on your skid, the skid's not that hard, right? The rack's not that, the stuff that they have to manufacture as a building product manufacturer, the complicated, controls and pumps and you're just assembling the manufactured stuff that they make that's much more difficult. I know I just scared all my contractors now, right? See, equal opportunity offender. They want to be solution aggregators and get right to the front, and they already have products that they can aggregate. They're not trying to think of construction processes. Contractors, you should be real worried. Any general contractors in the room? So I'm just going to tell you, most of the guys that said either I don't know what's going to happen with my business or we might not exist, those are my general contractors. Because they're like, okay, as things become more about plug and play and assembling architecture to assemble the building, if I don't self-perform, what do I do now? And the biggest contractors I know in New York City were just on a panel with me, and the guys were like, we started saying we were systems integrators. We were like, let's say we're systems integrators, because that's what we'll end up being. And I was like, great. And then somebody sent them a RFP. These are the big boys. And he goes, we didn't understand half of the words in the RFP. We had to go to Google and be like, what does supply chain, he's like, we didn't know anything about what they were asking us because we just said we're systems integrators. But if you truly want to be that and evolve and exist, you better start figuring out what an actual systems integrator does every single day, or else you might not be here. And then again, any architects and engineers, that's a hard job. You know why? Because the data that exists that makes all this different, you're the consumer of the data, not necessarily the generator. You consume that data and you need to arrange it and then disseminate it, but you don't have the make information, domain expertise, no offense, for it to know every system multiplied by every proprietary way that it's been manufactured. It's just impossible for one human to know that. And right now the technology is somewhat disconnected for that. So you need to really rely on understanding the makers and getting them to put their data up front so that you can use tools like generative design and things like SpaceMaker and things that are going to allow you to do planning and test fits up front, arrange things. You want to pull it's like you're the one on Amazon.com that wants to set the parameters of what your shoes look like that day, but you're not making the shoes and you're not actually going to buy the shoes later. But you're going to be like, I need red high heels with, patent leather, and they've got to be a 5-star rating, and I need to be, right? And by the way, buy these shoes, this shirt, and this socks, it told me. You don't have to buy high heels, but that's how I search. But I'm just saying, that's what you want to do, right? And you're highly data dependent on the other makers. Oops. And so the industries that you're in right now are transforming. And I won't go into too much of this, but this is the way we run some of our consulting at Autodesk, in understanding that you have to first understand when you want to be what you want to be when you grow up. If you say, I want to be a doctor, and right now you're a dentist, but I want to be an oncologist when I grow up, Well, you're gonna have to figure out if you actually have some training for that. Do you have the right skills for that? Most people, you can wanna be something, but you have to first assess your foundational skill set. By the way, most of you can afford a really expensive piece of equipment, but if you don't know how to use a 6-axis arm robot in your place, it's just gonna be like my treadmill and be super dusty or make a lot of scrap faster for you. So like, you better figure out if you have the right protocols in place, the right people in place, and then you should definitely buy automation, but you have to productize both your thinking and their physical piece parts. How do you make things? And how do we productize the workflows so that you do them every way the same time over and over and over again? Because only then can you optimize workflows by eliminating things, putting automation in those places, making things go faster. You have to walk before you get to fly, right? So you have to productize the physical piece parts that you see in there, and then their digital work, or first, if they're manual, the manual workflows of how people actually get information from the concept of thinking about one of those cool things, getting it out the door and installed into your job sites. You want to productize both. And that's where some people fall down. They just want to productize the physical because that's what we know the best. But if you don't do the digital, you're basically just figuring out how to digitize something to chuck it in the trash after and then starting from scratch again. You need to really understand how to reuse things, because we want to digitize them eventually and connect them to other things. So it says those shoes, those pants, that shirt, that rack, that, chiller plant, and that wall panel, and that, right? You want them to one day tell you the right things to put together. And by the way, my architects don't care what's behind the walls, above the ceiling, or underground, right? Some of my engineers don't even care, because they're just gonna redo the calculations anyway when whoever makes it gives me what's actually going to be drawn here, right? So that's where I think a lot of this starts first, not on the pretty things that somebody actually, not about the fire stairs, about the stairs in the front, we'll leave till the end, right? Let the architects still figure that out. But I don't know one architect in the world that likes to draw fire stairs, right? Or doors and hardware, dealing with that, right? Do you like fire stairs? Yeah, nobody does. But you know why I say that now? Years ago, I was in a meeting for a big hospital, and the guy in the middle of my meeting, I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm drawing fire stairs." I was like, "Pay attention. You should never have to do that again." So he's like, "Oh, I wish I never had to draw these again." So, but that's not what most people think the world is today. And I'm here to tell you that it is on its way there, and there's some first concrete steps of action that you can take today. And first of all, you've taken the first step, which is you showed up here today. So give yourself a hand that you came. Because most people don't want to learn, and we're looking for active learners in our industry now. That's one of the new skills that most companies are looking for, is active learners. So good on you that at least you came and you're learning, for all the guys that work for your company estimating. But what if data was actually granular? What if we could actually understand the data and reuse the data, and we could use it in real time, and we could understand it in real time? What if it was modern and connected data? Just like I said, my Amazon works. When I think of expected experience, how things should work, I always think of Amazon or Apple, one of the two things. I always go, what is this like if I went to go buy shoes? And mostly if it's a man I'm talking to, I'm like, what is it like when you want to buy whatever you like? And a guy was telling me about his Jeep parts, and I'm like, think about what that's like in your expected experience. Somebody doesn't come and create a bunch of Jeep stuff and then knock on your door and sell Jeep ideas to you, right? And that's we still have to go with our mouth and our feet, because our data is not connected in that way, and we don't actually have a place where we can go and sell this captured in technology to do all those great things. So, but what if you could? What if data was reusable and it was connected and insightful, where it actually, look, Inventor just partnered with ChatGPT, one of our products that's our manufacturing product, to understand productization. We just partnered with ChatGPT. I'm pretty excited about that. Why? Because I think that's how things in the world will end up going. It's not how many things you can think about it should do. It's what some algorithm is going to be able to far greater understand what something else can do from learning across, right? But what if when you knew what information you had, you could connect it in a common data environment where all that data was accessible to people and they could actually access it? Because I hate that word, single source of truth. I don't love that phrase. I know that's what we're all going for, but I think it needs to be in real time. It can't be I hate when I hear single source of truth and they're like, those are the latest drawings. And I'm like, wait, what? Why is it not in real time? If I adjust something, they're just the model. Why isn't it is just the model everyone's using live at this moment? And I know you're shaking your head. I said, what if? Wouldn't that be great? I think so. And I think we have to change our expected experience, that once you get that, And if you have that information, how are you going to give access to it for about lots of people? By the way, one of the biggest investments companies are making today, because things are getting more connected, there's sort of like a predecessor to them being connected. And that is getting your own data in order so that once these things are connected, that you can actually access it. So think of common data environment, and I see you're like shaking your head. It's like you've been on a roller coaster ride at an amusement park. There's always a sign. I'm only 5'3.5", so I was pretty little, like not now. And you had to be this tall to ride the ride. Common data environment is you have to be that tall to ride the ride. And then when things are getting more and more connected, you'll be able to access and use, and it'll be more seamless. But it's like saying you want to use all the apps on your phone without owning a phone. If you really actually want to use all the apps on your phone, you've got to have a common data environment in order to use all those. And most companies these days are investing in that because they need to connect their teams and connect their processes and also connect their data. And what we know about that is that data actually, in order to do that, you need to standardize some things and you need to get more efficient at making them and optimizing them so you're not making infinite different variations of stuff that doesn't have some parameter to it. But only then can you start innovating on those things when you start measuring and understanding some standards. And I don't mean like you make one component and that's the only way. I mean, you make a component that has these variation ability and you know that it can be done. To do that, you need some sort of governance in your company. Everybody just can't make some things in every way that they want, or you end up with a bunch of snowflakes. And then it's just like, listen, what's your sport? What's your favorite sport, any of you guys? What's your favorite sport? Basketball? I was like, why did you say basketball in Canada? I only know who Wayne Gretzky is, and like Billy Smith and Bobby Nystrom, that's it. So I lived on Long Island when I grew up. So let's say hockey for a minute, because the guy behind you yelled hockey as if you said basketball, and he was like, hockey, say hockey. What if every record in hockey had an asterisk next to it? It would be like not really an indicator of performance, right? You'd be like, well, that didn't count. He saved this many goals, but they only played 3 games that year, right? Like he was the best in percentage saves, but they had half the games or whatever, right? It's the same thing. It's like we don't know anything about what we're making because we're continually putting up asterisks on our performance, and therefore you can't have evolved data. Like product data, those are all products in there. You can make those into products over and over and over again. You should be able to configure a product, but not outside of its manufacturability. You shouldn't, where's my architects again? I won't pick on the same one. Who's an architect? He's afraid. He's like, you can't use software that actually enables you to stretch a piece of pipe beyond the actual length of pipe that they make it in. See why everyone's laughing? Because it's true, right? Or why would you design something that I have to cut that pipe and waste most of it and make the other length of it not usable? Now it's got to go in the garbage because I can't really use it for anything else. And that's why 30 to 40%, depending on what you read, of what we build in construction is ending up in our landfills. Who loves Yeti cups here or any other product? I shouldn't use a product name while I'm being videotaped. Who loves any product, right? Like, and Yeti's amazing. I love it. I own a million of them. And this is not about them. Sorry, just because we're recording. You could pick anything that you have an affinity towards. I have a drawer of those cups. If one day somebody went on the news, because this is not true about them, said 40% of the way they make those cups went in the trash, I would be like, I'm never buying one of those cups ever again, right? None of you would. None of you would buy any product that if you knew most of it was ending up in the trash, right? We do that every day. You're totally okay with it, and so are your owners, like if they only knew. Your government does that. Could you imagine if the government realized that, forget about transactional waste, which is about 41% of the dollar spent. After you get rid of that waste, that's just meetings and coordination about pipe that wasn't really drawn to be real, or some space that nothing can fit in, right? Like all that waste goes away. Of what's left, 40% of that 30 is ending up in the garbage. Can you imagine if you actually realized your tax dollars for a hospital or a school is ending up in the trash, that any of us would be okay with that? I just told you, so you shouldn't be okay with that. Change your expected experience about waste. So I believe in informed design, where we define things that are customizable, where the designers consume that data, arrange that data. They can make custom things all around that data if they want to until we get to that place. And we can make things from those drawings that actually just get automated and made because they've not been stretched too big or made too so they can't be, right? All the data about making them actually exists in the in the metadata with those associated components. And that operational data of like IoT sensors and how digital twins act don't just like tell you how things act in performance for the, just for that one building, but they actually feed into what those component combinations actually did for you so that you can reuse that little, like, it's almost like a little data backpack lives on that piece of artwork in there, that skid or whatever, and you now know how it's actually performing in real life. Just like I know my review on my shoes, how many 5-star ratings they have in real time, right? I know what that piece of equipment is doing in all these locations. Think I own 50 data centers. I want to know how well that's operating and the combination of things that I expect so that I can figure out if in Arizona I want to do the same combination versus some other place, right? So I believe that that's the way that this should go, not we make fake geometry and then we fill it in as we get down to the actual people that make it, and then finally at the end we know what it is and then it goes in the garbage. I would prefer us not to do that, right? We call that assumption-based design. And so that's why one of the things that's going on at our company is we have an incubation called Manufacturing Informed Design, which is an industrialized construction solution that allows you to actually use inventor data, which is not Revit. It is got iLogic. It allows you to say how big the rules and constraints of things can be, capacities and things like that, so that you can actually capture it in the Revit data, and that my architect can still adjust it, but he never stretches that thing too far that we can't make it. It doesn't let him, right? And by the way, we already have products that work like that called InfraWorks for bridge design. So again, it's like my pizza. We know you can do it. It already exists. Like, there are things that are out there like that. So this is just one way of looking at it. And this is actually, if you have products, you can participate in that beta group for working with this, with Inventor to Revit. And that's what industrialized construction is really going to be about in the future. How do we create a scalable approach to this environment that actually harnesses the power of all these manufacturing methods, not just only at the end to make something quicker, bespoke, but how do we do that and integrate it with a cloud-enabled design that reinvents us to be more sustainable and more scalable for those 10 billion more people and things that we need moving forward. That's truly what industrialized construction is all about. It's not about like just prefabbing something. By the way, you've prefabbed something versus a product like this. My architect, I'm going back to you. What's your name? What? Anand. So a generator from like, I don't know, FG Wilson or like Kohler or anything like that. They come in 200, 250, 300 horsepower, right? Whatever you're looking at. You don't wake up in the morning and go to your job and you're like, I don't care. I'm going to start designing a 217.5 today, right? No, you're gonna have a 200 or a 250, right? So that your thing is productized when it's like a generator where that guy is like, I know that I can only use it in this format, right? Now, in our world of manufacturing form design, you may be able to make a 200 and a 249, but then that that's all you can stretch it, and then you have to go to the 250, which gets you up to 259 or 60 or whatever it is, right? So you have to realize that that's the world we're going for, is that ask yourself if you have a product, do architects look at it like it's a generator? And if the answer is no, you don't have a product, right? So, and that means that we've got to look at this design, make a little differently as technology enablers like IoT sensors. Everything is highly instrumented today. If you think it's not, I'm sorry. I could say, Nike Pros today, and I'll have 25 ads for Nike Pros tonight. Like somewhere along this world, I'll see a bunch of Nike Pro shorts. But there's big data and analytics, and there's the open platform that we have to think about. Building information modeling is not just the end game. You have to inform that eye of your model with intelligence, because how many of you, raise your hand, have had a BIM model you can't build from? That was almost like a joke, right? I meant that as a joke. Like, have all of you, have any of you, like, this is like, I feel like at one time in my life I've received a BIM model that I'm like, this is not buildable. Is that right? Do you feel that way? Clap your hands if you feel that way, because no one's raising their hand. Okay, good. If I'm wrong, don't clap, ever. So I'm like, okay, we need to get manufacturing information to make the eye more intelligent, and this process of design for manufacturing assembly has very little to do with you. It's more about the data from the makers so that you can arrange that information differently. And they have to get away from just being prefabricators. They have to do this verb called productization in order to get products. so that you can use more of the robotics and automation and 3D printing that exists on this planet today. Like this cool thing that I might show you for a minute, that I'm down at the University of Florida. And what they're showing me here is, because we give some money to University of Florida for their robotics lab.
1,000 millimeter per second.
I'll talk over him a little bit. You can turn the sound down if you want. Because what they're showing you really cool is their hypothesis is you can have these smaller robots, and see those heads that have the suction cups on them? They're showing us using wood with those robots right now, but they quickly change out to use for light gauge steel. And they have a third hypothesis now that they can actually put 3D printed concrete through that same arm with a different head on it. So imagine if you could buy a smaller amount of robots, not just a giant factory that cost me, I'm pointing over to my friend over here, that cost me, $30 million. What if I could buy a couple of only pieces of equipment that would allow me to be super versatile, that I could ship out and move to different locations? Because if you don't think that's coming, it is definitely, I saw it, it's definitely coming. And I just think it's a matter of time before people's research like that becomes commercialized, because they've had to pay for their PhDs, right? So, because we're really looking at this, which is material circularity. And really the most mature people around material circularity are my contractors that prefab, because they've done more than anybody else. And we recently did some study where we were talking about how many of them have participated in a design for manufacturing and assembly for the purpose of disassembly and reuse. How many of you in the room have ever done that? Let's see a raise of hands. How many of you have ever worked on a job where you fabricated something because you knew it was going to be taken apart and reused some other way? Couple up here. In the United States, just last month we asked a group just like you, 250 something people answered, 250 people or so in the audience, 224 people in the audience answered that. And 39% said they had. It's a big number. You might be a little bit behind, just like you guys. And even more shockingly, of that 39%, over 20% of those people said they did it for a sustainability reason. I would have thought a different reason, but over 20% said they were doing it for a sustainability purpose, and that's really material circularity. Because we can actually define those piece parts and understand things like carbon and energy and how they come into the bigger picture and material circularity. This is a calculator that we actually built for one of our customers who actually was productized already, who wanted to know this, so that not only could they pick the right pieces and parts, but they could actually understand what was the right way for them to pack their trucks, to offload them in the most efficient manner, but what way would be the most efficient manner and use the least amount of carbon at the same time. Now, I don't know a lot of humans. By the way, my boyfriend got offered a PhD in math from Harvard. He can't figure that out. You need an algorithm for that, right? So this is the algorithm that we helped them build, this little calculator, and it basically gave them every option, you'll see in a second, of every truck, the way it could be packed in its most efficient way with the least amount of carbon, so that the guy on the job site didn't show up, open up the doors and be like, what do I do with that, right? No, he's like, oh great, these are all the pieces I need now, and it used the least amount of carbon for the least amount of trips. All right, I'm gonna go a little bit faster, but that's the one that it picked. And you'll see, could have picked any of these. So we have things like energy modeling that exists today that you can look at, and things like carbon analysis, and we're getting more and more products and tools and solutions around both of those as time goes on into the future. Everybody, I believe, in the state that we're in our planet will. And how many of you have heard of integrated factory modeling? Anyone? One, two, couple, three in here. Factory owners don't really like to get paper like we're giving them now, or even if it's just a digitized version of that. They actually want to get models, but models that they can actually use to simulate and emulate their products and systems going through. Because it used to be that drug companies were making new drugs every 7 years, but now they might need to make them every 7 months, right? Car companies might have things that they need to make quicker, and you all have factories, and you might want to understand how to connect your supply chain partners and what you're making to simulate what's in these shops and what you should make first based on what's going to be there, and understanding all your assets in digital form. But there's no one ring to rule them all. If this was only Apple products on my Apple phone, I would say differently, right? So we have something called Autodesk Platform Services, and the reason I left my business is I came to Autodesk because I believe in the platform. In order to be, I believe we're just like Apple, because if you looked at Forma, Fusion, and Flow at what's called Autodesk University, you can come once a year there, and they talk about all these new things. That's our cloud-enabled platform and our workflows in the cloud, and it actually allows for partners like these to build apps that connect. Like I always say, the equivalent is like on my Apple phone, Waze and Google Maps lives on my Apple phone. So does Spotify, so does WhatsApp, so do a lot of other things that Apple doesn't own, right? So right now, about half of those 5,000 apps I think right now that exist, although it changes every day, are built by our customers. How many of you are frustrated at your margins that you're making? Anyone? Some guy laughed in the corner over there. So, by the way, Autodesk has, in the last 5 years, we bought 11 companies and we bought 59 companies overall, some as much for $1 billion, right? Some of which many of these companies you use here. And look at the context that's going on. $5.4 billion last year for 228 deals. If you look at the average deal price. What are they looking at? Future of construction, like this conference. Enhanced productivity, green construction, like we're talking about, and construction supply chain. I'm not telling you to ditch your construction company and just build apps, but I'm certainly saying you work in the business to know where some of this data is disconnected. And if you happen to have some people going to either our hackathons for platform services, or you want to start understanding how to invest in having consulting at Autodesk work with you to build some of these for yourself, it might be a good idea. I mean, as my 14-year-old would say, is it? Like, yes, it probably is. You can use that for yourself, or you can maybe externalize it, as many of the construction companies, the big ones, are doing right now. A lot of them have big technology arms. But what are the first steps you have to take? Whoops, that went too fast. I always say, this is what I get from every one of our customers. I want to start, but I don't know those first concrete steps of action to take. The group that I come from is Autodesk Autodesk Customer Success. I don't sell services and I don't sell product. That's not what I do, but I've watched our groups actually help customers get their first concrete steps of action, because most of the time it's in this messy middle. It's not just the product, and it's not just a big value driver that you want. It's a solution that really is like a combination of products and outcomes and capabilities and changes in behavior. So it's like, think about it. How many apps did it take you to get to the restaurant tonight? How many of those did you just use seamlessly, magically? What if you didn't actually search for it on OpenTable versus someplace else? So it's like a combination of products, how good you are at using them, and changing your behavior to do so. And I believe that that's where the future is going. I like to think of it like cake, because I like cake. And I'm almost done. I think I'm still good on time, right, Sarah? I think I'm still good on time. I like to think of it like layer cake, because again, it's a lot of different things that have to be put together, but it's also about your underlying systems architecture. And again, it all starts with CDE, Common Data Environment, and what you have and where you're trying to go. So as an example, that integrated factory modeling that you looked at, you don't buy integrated factory modeling as a product from Autodesk. You actually need multiple products, ours and other people's, that we help you organize into many different workflows, and I'm only showing a few here. There's probably like 20. And there's a solution, and also tools from the App Store, things that are ours, things that are other people's partners mostly, and even competitors' tools, and anything even proprietary that you might have that isn't ours. But I believe solutions are in sets, because I don't want to just like do one thing and not know what I'm doing next. That's not how my brain works. For those of you who know me, I'm neurally diverse, so I just can't do one thing at a time. I have to know like what are the next 5 things I'm doing. So I need to know what my sets are. So if you looked at complex solutions like building blocks, and you wanted to get to one of those outcomes that we looked at, some of those business model changes, you might say, look, if you want to go from an MEP fabricator to a product and systems integrator, you've got to do these solutions. But if you're one of my building product manufacturers like the Hiltis and the Victaulics, you may need these solutions if you truly want to move up front. If you're one of my big owners who really wants to own their data and be predictive about things, you'll need a different combination of solutions in order to get there. And if you want to be one of my generative designers, you too will need some different ones, like I showed in form design and some more about the energy analysis, all the way up to connected construction, because we don't want, as my dad used to say, any more dead cats thrown over the fence. We don't want, right? We want our design data to seamlessly work with our construction data as if you knew never to cut that pipe in that place when you designed it, right? That's really important to us. So, some big announcements, and then I think I'm wrapping up. If you want to learn more about this, this is free. It's on Autodesk's.com site, and it's industrialized construction. It's a master's level course. There's also a shorter business level course on the Learning Hub. It's all free. If you use something like Building Connected through us, which is a bidding platform, for free, you can actually go and do your profile, actually redo it for all these industrialized construction products, services, and building types. This is all free. You can do this for free. So somebody can find you if you're making any of the things on this list. And we've also, and in fact, started this assessment with Haley and Aldrich, our partners. Interestingly enough, I didn't know it when I agreed to do this, that actually Pitt Meadows Plumbing has already done this industrialized construction maturity assessment with them. And they've already gotten their roadmap and completed some of the items for improvement. But you can actually get them to come out to your shop with Autodesk, and they can help you get on the journey by doing a real assessment, not a self-assessment like where you think you are today and where you want to be when you grow up, but they'll actually tell you where you are actually at and what to do afterwards to get there. And they look at a lot of great things on that maturity assessment, and it's evolving all the time. I have, just to give you what I think the future is going to be like, I have big GCs, big owners asking me, could I do that for my entire supply chain that's bidding out work or partnering with us? Could I ask them for their ICMA so I can understand where they're at? Because they're like, but for looking at their 5-year-old website and seeing some pictures, how would I, now that I can find them on Building Connected, how do I know if they're good at it? And I was like, well, and then they asked me, are these guys good? I get a call every day from around the world. I'm like, my version of good and your version of good might be totally different. Let's come up with an assessment that is just agnostic to my feelings. Unless you can eat off the floor, it's not good. You know what I mean? So how do we do this? We have to work together. I told you why, because we can't afford this transactional waste, and we certainly can't afford the construction waste. We should all walk out of here a little with our heads hung down a little bit. If I didn't make you unhappy after this, I'm hoping to with that number. But I will show you that it's not just me who talks about this. One of our customers actually is recruiting in this manner.
I want a smarter future. A future where I get to enjoy nature
the same way previous generations got to.
I want a future where connectivity
and autonomy are about
more than technology.
They're about communities
and freedom.
Freedom to travel
independently.
A future where buildings are designed
for all of us.
Where hospitals can be built in factories
and open faster.
Where towns are designed to be less lonely.
Places that make me feel proud. That make me feel I belong.
Where buildings can be unbuilt,
rebuilt and reused.
The decisions we make today become our future. At WSP, there are 55,000 of us changemakers, using our insights to imagine the world and our future as it could be.
Together,
we are planning,
advising,
designing
for a fairer,
smarter future.
We are
Tim,
Nonku,
Han, Teresa,
Naveed.
We are
WSP.
So if you don't believe me, you can ask them. But if you want to ask me and you have any questions after this, you can reach me on any social media. I try to respond to everyone. I'm pretty good at responding to everyone that actually reaches out to me. Reach out a second time if I don't respond. But that is my time today, and I thank you for all the time that you were patient listening to me.